Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. Buckle up, as it's a long one, and don't forget to listen to the end of the story to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, guys, and please like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. I, 36 female, was married to my ex-husband. Let's call him Chris, 38 male, for 10 years. We were together for 14 years in total, and I genuinely thought we had a good relationship for most of that time. We started dating when we were both fresh out of college, grew up together, built our careers, and eventually got married. From the outside, everything seemed perfect, and I thought we were building a strong lifelong partnership. However, there was always one major obstacle in our relationship. Chris's mother, my ex-mother-in-law, who I'll refer to as Linda, 65 female. Linda is, how do I put this? She's a textbook manipulator. From the moment I entered Chris's life, I felt like she was competing with me for his attention. In the beginning, I brushed it off as normal possessiveness from a mom who's close to her son. But as the years went by, it became clear that Linda wasn't just protective. She was determined to maintain control over Chris, and anyone who got in the way, aka me, was an enemy. When Chris and I got married, I hoped that things would settle down. I figured Linda would come to terms with the fact that her son was now building a life with me and would adjust. Spoiler alert, she didn't. From the beginning, Linda was always inserting herself into our relationship. Whether it was offering advice or how we should decorate our home, telling me how I should dress, or making passive-aggressive comments about my career, she always found a way to make me feel like I was under her microscope. Chris was close with his mom, but I don't think he saw the full extent of her behavior. To him, she was just being helpful or concerned. Every time I tried to raise my concerns, he'd brush them off and say I was overreacting. But it wasn't just the little things. Linda would constantly show up unannounced, make decisions for us without asking, and worst of all, she would talk to Chris behind my back about things that affected both of us. For example, when we were thinking about buying a house, Linda decided to put her 2 cents in about how we should live closer to her so she could help us more. When I disagreed and suggested a neighborhood we both liked, she flipped the switch and started guilt-tripping Chris about how I was taking him away from her. Looking back, I realized that this was a turning point in our marriage. Linda was very good at making me look like the unreasonable one, while she played the concerned, loving mother who only wanted what was best for her son. And Chris? Well, Chris always fell for it. Things escalated when we started talking about having kids. I always wanted children, and so did Chris, or at least that's what I thought. But whenever we discussed starting a family, Chris would suddenly get cold feet. At first, I assumed it was just normal anxiety about such a big life change. But eventually, I found out that Linda had been feeding him fears and doubts. She'd say things like, "Are you sure you're ready to be a father? You'll lose all your freedom." Or, "Having kids is a big responsibility. What if you're not ready for that?" She even went as far as to suggest that I was pressuring Chris into having kids before he was ready, which couldn't have been further from the truth. Every time I brought up the topic, it was met with resistance from Chris, and I was left feeling confused and hurt. Then came the incident that broke the camel's back. One night, I was doing laundry when I accidentally knocked over one of Chris's jackets. As I picked it up, a letter fell out of the pocket. It was from Linda. I know I shouldn't have read it, but curiosity got the better of me. And boy, do I wish I hadn't. The letter was a long, detailed rant about how I was ruining Chris's life, how I was too focused on my career to be a good wife, and how I would never make a good mother. I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. Linda had essentially been poisoning my husband against me for years, and this letter was the proof. I confronted Chris about it, but instead of apologizing or seeing my side of things, he got defensive. He said that Linda was just worried about him and that I was blowing things out of proportion. That's when I realized that I had been fighting a losing battle this entire time. Chris was never going to stand up to his mother, and our marriage had become a casualty of her manipulation. A few months after the letter incident, Chris and I divorced. I won't say that Linda was the only reason. We had our own issues to work through. But she was definitely the final nail in the coffin. After 10 years of trying to make it work, I was done. I couldn't compete with a mother-in-law who had more control over my husband than I did. Chris and I parted on relatively civil terms, but I made it clear that I didn't want anything to do with Linda going forward. I didn't even attend the family gatherings during the final months of our marriage because I couldn't bear to be around her. Fast forward to last year. Chris remarried, and his new wife, let's call her Jessica, entered the picture. I won't pretend I didn't feel a little twinge of jealousy at first, but mostly I was relieved that Linda's attention was no longer focused on me. I figured that now, with a new daughter-in-law, Linda would have a new target for her controlling behavior. And I was right. According to mutual friends, Linda tried pulling the same stunts with Jessica that she did with me, showing up unannounced, making unsolicited comments about their marriage, and generally being a nightmare. But the difference this time? Jessica wasn't having any of it. She cut Linda off completely after just 1 year of marriage. No contact. Linda was devastated and couldn't understand why Jessica wouldn't let her be a part of their lives. So here's where things get really complicated. A few weeks ago, I was at home enjoying a quiet evening when there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find, wait for it, Linda. I was shocked. I hadn't seen or spoken to her since the divorce, and I had no idea why she would be on my doorstep. She looked distraught, almost desperate, and immediately started crying. She told me that Jessica had cut her off and that she had no one else to turn to. Apparently, Chris had sided with Jessica, finally, and told Linda that she needed to respect their boundaries. Linda, being the type of person who always thinks she's right, refused to listen and continued to interfere, which led to Jessica cutting ties completely. I stood there in disbelief as Linda went on and on about how heartbroken she was, how she had lost her son and didn't know what to do. Then came the kicker. She asked me for help. She wanted me to talk to Chris, to try to get him to mend things with her, and maybe even put in a good word with Jessica. I was stunned. This woman, who had spent years ruining my marriage, poisoning my husband against me, and making my life a living hell, was now asking for my help? I could barely believe the audacity. I asked her why she thought I would ever do something like that, and her response was, "Because you're the only one who understands. You were part of this family for so long. You know how hard it is." I stood there for what felt like an eternity, just staring at her. And then, without a word, I shut the door in her face. Since then, Linda has tried contacting me multiple times, texts, voicemails, even showing up at my work. She's desperate, and it's honestly kind of sad. But at the same time, I can't help but feel a sense of justice. She tore my marriage apart, manipulated Chris for years, and now she's facing the consequences of her actions with Jessica. She expects me to save her? I've talked to a few friends about the situation, and most of them are on my side. They say that Linda got what she deserved, and that I have no obligation to help her. But a few people have said that I'm being too harsh, that maybe this is an opportunity for me to show compassion and rise above the situation. But honestly, I don't think I owe her anything. She destroyed my marriage and caused me years of pain. I finally started to rebuild my life without her and Chris, and I don't see why I should let her back in, even if it's just to help her patch things up with her new daughter-in-law. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for shutting the door on my ex-mother-in-law when she asked for my help after ruining my marriage? Are you kidding me? This woman literally sabotaged OP's marriage, poisoned her husband's mind against OP, and now that she's facing the consequences of her actions with her new daughter-in-law, she wants OP to fix it? The audacity! OP doesn't owe her a single thing. In fact, it sounds like karma is finally catching up with her. Shutting the door in her face was the right move. OP should not let her manipulate her the way she did with her ex-husband. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Not the a-hole. The fact that she even came to you in the first place is wild. It's clear that Linda hasn't learned a thing, and now that she's burned all her bridges with her son and new daughter-in-law, she's desperate. I'm sorry, but her feelings are not your responsibility. She dug this hole for herself. The moment you read that letter from her trashing you as a wife and mother, she lost any right to your kindness. You are well within your rights to shut her out of your life permanently. Not the a-hole. It sounds like your ex-mother-in-law is one of these people who doesn't believe they've done anything wrong and thinks everyone else is the problem. It's very telling that she's come crawling to you now that her new daughter-in-law has set boundaries. Honestly, she's lucky you even answered the door. Your ex-mother-in-law hasn't changed, and if you help her, you're just opening yourself up to more manipulation and drama. Let her deal with the mess she made. Not the a-hole, and honestly, you've shown a lot of strength by not engaging further with her. Your ex-mother-in-law destroyed your marriage, refused to respect your boundaries, and manipulated your husband. Now she's facing the consequences of that same toxic behavior with her new family. And she has the nerve to ask you for help? Nope. She's got to live with the choices she made. You're not responsible for fixing the relationship she ruined. Protect your peace and keep that door closed. Recently, my brother told me he and sister-in-law are going to TTC in January. I think it's great they want to start a family someday, but sister-in-law's health and/or weight are a concern. She's 5'6" and nearly morbidly obese, if she's not already in that category. I estimate she weighs around 250 pounds, but it's just a guess. I'm a nurse, so it's an educated guess, but I obviously can't say for sure. Her health has already created problems. She claims she can't work any longer, and after the school year ended in May, she made the decision not to return. She taught high school English. Her reasoning was pre-diabetes and back and leg pain problems that made it too difficult. She also said it was dangerous and unhealthy for her to continue working. They've had to borrow money from our parents a handful of times. They say it's to cover medical expenses, which would be understandable, but then continue to spend money on junk food and eating out. For example, they borrowed $1,500 last month. 2 days later, my mom was at their house and said the fridge and pantry were loaded with junk. They're clearly not putting effort into improving their health. So when my brother shared the news with me about TTC, I was overwhelmed. I told him I was excited to become an aunt, but sister-in-law's health worries me. I felt obligated to bring it up because they're family, and as an OB nurse, I have first-hand experience with this and know about the potential dangers surrounding obesity and pregnancy. Both sister-in-law and the baby would be at risk for a number of complications. I didn't go into details, but I did share my general concern and suggested he talk to her about losing some weight before TTC. He said he understood where I was coming from, but they want to be done having kids by 35 and will probably stick to their plan. I could tell he was taken aback by my response, but I didn't realize he was actually mad until later when I received a text from my mom. Apparently, my brother called her and said I was berating him and implied they were irresponsible for TTC. He said I attacked sister-in-law and made fun of her weight, which was not true. I cleared everything up with my mom. She knows he can be sensitive, especially where his wife is concerned, but couldn't fully calm her anxiety. My brother and sister-in-law said they're considering skipping Christmas. They also made a Facebook post about distancing themselves from non-supportive family. My mom is worried they're going to go forward with their plans to have a baby and will use the child as leverage to force her to be blindly supportive and/or cut me off. I realize she's getting way ahead of herself, but I also understand why this would worry her too. I don't know how to handle this now. I love my brother and I want to be involved in his life, but this is really frustrating me. They're making what I believe is a somewhat selfish and ignorant decision. Then he exaggerated to our mother, and now they're making thinly veiled threats in an attempt to force the family to be supportive. I have to wonder how they'll respond if our parents refuse to give them more money or deny other requests for help. I'm not sure if this is a hill to die on issue or if it's best to let it go. I would appreciate hearing objective opinions. How would you handle this? Do you think I should apologize? I don't think you're factually wrong, and I think your heart was in the right place. But I do think you overstepped. There are few people on the face of the earth who are going to say, you know, I had a real weight and binge eating problem. But then my sister-in-law offered some unsolicited advice, and it totally turned me around. Like your brother and sister-in-law know what she weighs. They presumably have access to the internet, books, or doctors if they want to change her lifestyle habits. It's like smoking. As frustrating as it is, you can't force an adult to give up an unhealthy habit. You have to let them see the light for themselves. Getting too pushy or shamey just makes them dig in. I think you can avoid apologizing for the content of what you said, but you can still apologize for overstepping and offering advice that wasn't asked for. TTC when they're already borrowing? For duck's sake. Not only borrowing money, but sister-in-law quit her job because it was too hard. What does she think raising a child or children is going to be? A walk in the park? Oh, wait. No, that's physical exercise. She wouldn't do that either. They're being incredibly selfish. That's always a positive sign for great parents, right? If she cannot work, then why does she feel like it would be a good time to have a baby? Most women gain weight in pregnancy, which will cause further stress to her joints. Which, to be fair, I call BS on her claims of not being able to work. I do think your mom's claims are justified. I have no doubt the baby will be a bargaining chip for them.